Why SJWs often don't realize that they are SJWs. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I was thinking today about how there's a massive quantity of people who would be considered SJWs, at least certainly by most of my regular audience members. But these people simultaneously claim to think that SJWs are annoying, and they wouldn't think that they are one. No, I'm obviously not referring to people like the Cat Blacks of the world or individual semi-normal people who have attempted to reclaim the term social justice warrior because they think that people should be warriors for social justice. Nor am I talking about people like Lindy West, who gets super offended by the usage of the acronym SJW and once started public beef with Patton Oswalt over his usage of the phrase on Twitter, claiming to be offended as it is a phrase used by bigots who insult people that attempt to enact positive social change. Or something. I couldn't find screen captures of the tweets, and she quit Twitter because everybody hates Lindy West. No, what I'm really talking about is the countless average blue pill Americans who can look at somebody like Big Red, or maybe even read the blog Everyday Feminism, and they can admit that these are examples of crazy feminists that take things too far and could be safely called SJWs in a negative sense. However, these same people will turn around and say, well, I'm a feminist. It's just these new feminists that are the problem. Or they're a white person that says, white people cannot experience racism because racism is a system that was invented by colonialism. But that doesn't mean people should hate white people like a lot of these college students do, of course. Though, to be honest, I do understand why people hate some white people because, let's face it, white people are pretty annoying. Even further than that, these people will probably demonize everybody they see as privileged, advocate for things like affirmative action, and things like quote-unquote transformative justice for communities of color, which generally tends to be window dressing for people that think that white and Asian people should give stuff up to black and brown people, stuff like their houses. But they might not even realize that people who advocate for transformative justice actually want that. They don't realize that there's people who are literally asking that white people give up their houses to black people. No, these people think that there's crappy feminists out there, and they can totally understand why people call other people SJWs as an insult. But despite the fact that they believe in basically the exact same principles as SJWs, they think that they aren't an SJW for some reason. Why is this? Personally, I think a lot of it has to do mainly with complete and utter political illiteracy. A major percentage of these people probably self-identify as anarchists or some version of socialists, at least maybe Democrats. But of course, they know approximately nothing about economics, nor do they understand Marxism or have any understanding of history in terms of failed communist governments. They might think that they know something about anarchism because there is a massive wealth of throwaway anarchist theory type text, which is basically just pipe dream romanticization of utopian societies that have not and will not ever exist. And everything they talk about seemingly always leads back to talking about the Spanish Civil War. They also might romanticize Marx without having actually read Marx, or maybe Lenin or Trotsky, though again, this is usually based around hand-me-down regurgitated information about political systems that have either failed or simply haven't even existed long enough to fail. But really, the sad fact of the matter is that although the word anarchy is inherently supposed to be based around the lack of leaders and authority, as that is what defines the word itself, the seeming majority of people who self-identify as anarchists and the majority of their friends are all complete authoritarians who follow orders like a bunch of sheep. Sorry, not sorry for saying so, but I've known these types of people for decades, and they've just gotten worse and worse in recent years. Just look in the comment section under my video, 9 types of people attracted to anarchist groups, and you'll see dozens of people telling me that I just don't understand real anarchism, as if it's a doctrine, which would obviously defeat the purpose to any thinking person. Still, even the SJWs who don't think that they are SJWs that don't self-identify as anarchists tend to be major authoritarians, in the way that these are people who aren't thinking for themselves about what they really believe regarding politics and socio-political stuff. Rather, they are always waiting for instructions. Do they need to know what to think about a political candidate? They have a solution. Find a blog article written by a queer woman of color, because her lived experiences as a marginalized person gives her insight into deeper socio-political and political truths than most people understand. Or they can just vote for the queer woman of color if she's running. Do these people want to know whether or not they should support Antifa? Well, they shouldn't actually bother to look into their actions for themselves in videos on YouTube, but instead they should look to somebody they respect for their opinion on the quote-unquote resistance, which is Antifa. Preferably a queer woman of color they should listen to, of course. Over and over, these passive, non-self-aware SJWs look to other people for all the answers, assuming that they are mere plebs that don't really understand politics and that they should answer to somebody else. Which is true, of course, because they don't understand politics, but unfortunately, the people that they tend to look to for instructions, the Cat Blacks of the world, don't understand politics either. And if she does, she's much more deeply evil than I actually suspected. You see, it always seemingly turns out that everybody in SJW land is getting their orders from somewhere. And while I don't entirely know where exactly that chain of command goes up to, and how many or few people sit at the top of it, there is definitely a common theme that runs throughout this entire socio-political mentality. That is the demonization of perceived privilege, the glorification of the marginalized, resentment towards people who are wealthy and productive, as they are assumed to be selfish, lazy thieves instead of people who legitimately work hard, and an assumption that demographics that tend not to be successful in our current system should be treated as virtuous for their mere existence. That is the message. Over and over. If you boil it down, that's what all of these people are saying. Even the supposedly non-authoritarian anarchists, even the nice feminists, even the people who complain about people like Big Red. That mentality, ultimately, it really is the mentality of communism. As much as it pains me to say it, as much as I denied it to myself for several years. And what people have to remember is this: true communists are out there. People who believe that productive people should be forced to pay the tab for the non-productive people are out there. These people legitimately think that if productive people are not forced to give stuff to non-productive people, then the world will be unfair. And thus, productive people should be demonized if they are not ready and willing to give away the majority of their wealth. That's how these people think, and their entire lives are devoted to trying to install this system of government wherever they can, including in the United States, Canada, Great Britain, and everywhere else in the West. However, due to the fact that at least certainly by the McCarthy era during the 1950s, the majority of the West was deeply fearful of communism, and it could be life-ruining in certain instances to have been associated with that political ideology. Thus, true believer communists that generally went underground and now hide what they really believe. Communists are kind of like vampires in that way. They'll never come right out and reveal their true nature when they first meet you. They never seem to completely die out. And most importantly, they are good at quietly breeding and creating more communists. Thus, these people have a fairly pronounced history in recent years that is well documented of infiltrating civil rights organizations, various political offices, activist and anarchist groups with the intention of leading people towards a communist revolution by slyly implying that communism is the way to achieve justice for all. But it's part of their MO to be somewhat hush-hush about the fact that they are communists. And so, what I think happened is a lot of these people got into positions of influence in academia, in media, and even in government, and not a lot of people knew that because they wouldn't say what they were. They wouldn't just say that they were communists, just like every member of a cult-like ideology tends not to.
Excuse me, are y'all with the cult?
We're not a cult. We're an organization that promotes love and...
Yeah, this is it.
At the end of the day, the cliche is always that communism sounds good on paper until people actually realize what happens when people try to implement these systems into practice. Over the past 5 years, especially since Obama legalized the usage of propaganda on the American people by overturning the Smith-Mundt Act, we were inundated with messages of social justice in every facet of American culture, and a very large percentage of that ended up stemming from thinkers with a full-blown communist agenda. Was Obama a secret communist? Well, some people say that he is, though I think that's likely taking things a bit too far. However, I'd bet money that he and people that worked under him ended up giving money to people that claimed to be advocating for social justice because they felt that that would help get more votes for the Democratic Party in 2016 if the Democrats were associated with social justice. But plenty of those people who got money for trying to get those votes with the social justice votes, plenty of those people who got money were full-blown communists, and thus they quietly peddled communist propaganda to the American people, and it was appealing to a lot of people because the vast majority of people want to theoretically help the little guy. Truthfully, the probable majority of ideologies have a component of helping the needy. Remember, including Christianity, and communists exploit that altruistic sensibility to act like they are the true way of making the world fair. And so, they quietly convinced a bunch of people to not just be democratic socialists, but to have many communist ethos within them, like the relentless demonization of anybody successful, even though these people didn't understand what they were starting to be conditioned to believe. They continued to try to do this in the current year, though they've obviously started to realize that the jig is basically entirely up, which is why we have Antifa. The average citizen didn't necessarily fall for it hook, line, and sinker, but they were still influenced by it. Did I leave anything out? Drop me a comment and stay tuned.